A boy is bullied by his high school classmates, but in the future he becomes a special assassin who is out for revenge. In 1996, in the boys' locker room of a high school, a chubby boy dances happily in the shower, while his classmates laugh hysterically. Outside, in the gym, the Student of the Year award ceremony is taking place. The school's favorite, Calvin Joyner, known as Golden Jet, is about to receive the honor. Calvin begins a motivational speech worthy of a TED Talk, but the moment is abruptly interrupted. The chubby boy is thrown out of the shower, completely naked, and throws himself in an epic and tragic way in the middle of the gym. Laughter echoes, but Calvin, in an act of solidarity, covers the boy with his sports jacket. Point for the hero, 0 for the poor boy's dignity. Cut to the present day. Calvin is no longer Golden Jet. Now he's just an accountant, enviously watching his colleagues' promotions and enduring the lame jokes at the office. Married to his high school sweetheart, Maggie, he faces the pressure of attending an alumni reunion. Maggie is excited, but Calvin doesn't want to go, fearing questions about his career. The conversation reaches a dramatic level, with Maggie saying, "I didn't know your life with me was a silent, crushing disappointment." The next day, Calvin receives a friend request on Facebook from a certain Bob Stone. With no idea who he is, he accepts. Soon, Bob invites Calvin to have a beer, and, surprise, it's the same Robbie Weirdick, the guy from the locker room. Calvin is shocked to see his former colleague, now muscular and confident. They have fun until Bob, in a Hulk moment, breaks up a bar fight with frightening ease. The pair decide to visit their old school, where Calvin faces an altar of trophies and accomplishments from his youth. Frustrated, he thinks, if my 18-year-old self saw me now, he'd call me a loser. The evening takes a turn when Bob asks for help with bills, but ends up spilling beer on Calvin's laptop and sleeping on his friend's couch. The next morning, Calvin gets a visit from the CIA, who reveal that Bob is wanted for murder and treason. Calvin, in an act of instant loyalty, turns his friend in, but Bob has already disappeared. The CIA then recruits Calvin as bait. What could possibly go wrong? Okay, pretty much anything. When Bob reappears, he turns Calvin's office into a battlefield. Fire, gunshots, broken windows, and a triumphant escape on an inflatable gorilla are just the beginning. In the car, Bob explains that a criminal known as the Black Badger has stolen the codes to the US spy system. Bob is determined to get the codes back, clear his name, and avenge the death of his partner, Phil. Calvin, however, just wants to go home and pretend nothing happened. But Bob reminds him, the CIA has already put your house under surveillance, and so Calvin is officially in the game whether he likes it or not. I definitely wouldn't have betrayed Bob right away. A friendship forged in high adventures deserves better than that. And I certainly wouldn't have jumped out of a window holding on to someone with a vague plan and an inflatable gorilla in sight. The most interesting scene is Bob's ability to deal with chaotic situations with a mix of humor and brute force, something reminiscent of the movie 21 Jump Street. And speaking of which, here's a fun fact. During filming, Dwayne Johnson wore prosthetics to look smaller in the flashback scenes, adding a unique touch to Robbie's transformation. Now, an intriguing question for you. What would you do if a former schoolmate showed up years later, completely transformed, but put you in a situation worthy of an action movie? Leave your comment below. Halfway through, Calvin is interrupted by none other than Agent Harris, who insists that Bob is completely out of his mind and that he is, in fact, the dreaded Black Badger. Calvin, convinced by the performance, accepts a warning device that must be activated in Bob's presence. And, of course, all while he is late for couples therapy. He rushes in, enters the office, and tries to pretend he doesn't know Bob. After some psychological games, Calvin loses his temper, infuriating his wife. For a brief moment, he almost activates the device, but Bob convinces him otherwise, arguing that he needs Calvin's help. Unbelievably, Calvin believes him. The pair seeks help from Trevor, an old acquaintance from school who loved to humiliate Bob. Surprisingly, Trevor seems to have changed and gives them the transaction number they were looking for. But, of course, this is just a facade. In a classic act of childishness, Trevor humiliates Bob once again. Calvin expects an explosive reaction from his friend, but Bob just walks away with his head down. In the parking lot, Calvin gets a call from Harris, demanding that he keep Bob on the premises. During an emotional moment, Bob reveals that Calvin was the only one who didn't bully him at school, and Calvin, in an act of guilt, admits to having turned Bob in to the CIA. In the interrogation room, Harris tries unsuccessfully to get information out of Bob, even threatening him with torture. Meanwhile, Calvin hatches a plan, distracts the guards, grabs the keys and breaks into the room. They pin Harris to the table and escape, with the transaction numbers revealing coordinates for a suspicious meeting in Boston. After a sequence involving a plane, they finally arrive at the location, an underground parking lot. Calvin, finding it all too obvious, deduces that the meeting will be there. Separated, Bob meets the clients and Calvin spots Harris. He decides that she is the real Black Badger, but Bob is too busy to answer the phone. In the parking lot climax, chaos erupts. Shots are fired, flash drives fly across the ground, and the CIA invades the scene. Calvin grabs one of the drives and tries to flee, but ends up in the middle of a confrontation. On the bridge, he finds himself between Bob and Phil, each trying to convince him of his innocence. Confused and resentful, Calvin shoots Bob. Yes, that's right. Phil, thinking he's the smart one this time, demands the codes, but Calvin tries to shoot again, only to realize that the gun is out of ammo. The truth comes out. Phil is the real Black Badger, but in a moment of distraction, Bob defeats him with a stunning blow. The pair deliver the codes to the CIA and head to the alumni reunion. Arriving in style by helicopter, Calvin introduces Bob to his wife, Maggie, apologizing for not valuing the simple happiness in his life. At the party, Bob hesitates to enter, but Calvin encourages him, revealing that he rigged the vote to make him prom king. Bob, now confident, faces Trevor one last time, knocking him out with one punch. On stage, Bob gives a moving speech about friendship, but in a twist, he repeats the most traumatic moment of his youth by stripping completely naked on stage. Months later, Bob surprises Calvin on his first day at the CIA by bringing him the jacket he wore in high school. The unlikely friendship between Calvin and Bob is a fascinating story, showing that even opposites can form lasting bonds. Now, don't forget to check out this video where a group of kids find a stone that gives them superpowers. Just click. See you there and stay well.